So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kostas. I'm one of the Impact Society members. I would like to thank all of you for your participation, and particularly Holon and Nava for bringing us together. Professor Sayfan, Borghini. I'm sorry about my accent. If I'm doing mistakes, just be
perfect.
direct and correct me. I will speak a little bit. I will give an introduction about Sayfan. She has a background in biophysics. Her research has been a connecting line for collaboration with information scientists on one side and design and social innovation on the other. I think that reflects perfect this multidisciplinary department if you belong to this dream team that Nava Stack has created. Indeed. And a lot of people in Europe, I'm telling you now, they would like to create this right now. And you have it, for at least 3 years or 4 years. I don't know how many times, I'm jealous of what, in a good way, jealous of what, Nava has created, and all of you. So it has, this combines information scientists on one side and design and social innovation on the other, applying principles of complex systems to multiple fields. The focus is on providing the framework to address the interconnected social, technological, and environmental systems that materialize the current human habitat and determine its future. She is a faculty member at the School of Multidisciplinary Studies of Holon Institute of Technology in Israel, where she initiated the first inter-faculty courses on bio-inspired design and on sense-making. She's teaching at the Master Program in Design for Technological Environments. She's an affiliated researcher at the ECO Evolution, Complexity, and Cognition Research Group, Free University in Brussels, where she teaches complexity thinking and postgraduate school of thinking, and the Buckminster College Reimagining Intercultural Education. She's part in the European ISEPO group on complexity and planning, and she has taken part in few European projects. She has collaborated with Ben Gurion University and Hebrew University on urban planning research addressing cities as a complex systems. So today's talk is named, initially it was complexity thinking and sense-making in order to make the things easier. And a few things about the topic. Sense-making is, in its most simple definition, relates to how do we make sense of the world so that we can act in it. This is the say, yes. And the rest I will provide to Sayfan, and all of us we are looking forward. Thank you very much, Sayfan.
Thank you very much.
Thing that I know.
Yes. Bye. Thank you very much, Kostas. Thank you for the invitation and for the presentation. So we are going to discuss today sense making. I will share. Where am I? Here. Here we are. Okay, good. So as Kostas was saying, the simplest way to describe sense making is as the continuous process, is a concept that describes the continuous process of gaining insight into the situation in which we exist so that we can act in it. On the very, very wide frame, on the very broad standpoint, we can place it akin to the biological process of being alive, because if we think any organism continuously needs to act in an environment while receiving information from the environment. And this cognitive loop we will find few times. So I place it here, though we are not going on this broad format, but to remember that the way that cognition is looked at as we act, and from acting we receive information. So in this sense, the world, it's not an objective object out there, but it's a reciprocal action between whoever is acting in the world and the world. So it is a conceptual lens, as I said, to understand and to facilitate mostly the way that individuals and groups are making sense of ambiguous situation. It is, of course, a multidisciplinary concept. It's developed along the last 40 years, and it brings in cognitive studies, sociology, psychology, organizational studies, communication, and so on. And it provides us with this bridge also in the collaboration setup, because it's about bridging the individual meaning and a shared meaning of a group, of a team, of a society. And so in this sense, it also supports innovation processes, or it supports the capacity for collective reorganization in disruption, whether the disruption is small, is big, is social, is political, it all works. So what we're going to focus in this lecture, I will first of all frame a moment what I mean by complex, by opening up very few principles from complexity. Then I will give a sense-making overview, the cognitive view, the social aspect, the way it is influenced by culture, by context, and it is driven by human need for coherency. We will look at some technologies or methodologies, because I'm not entering the digital technologies of it. And while looking at the methodologies, I will also show some of the work from teaching and research and how it can be used. So let's begin from complexity. So what is complex? I find the definition of Weaver, who was a physicist from the middle of the 20th century, the most straightforward. He had to give this presentation about the physics to come, the science to come. And he said, in the very first part of science, which means from Newton until the end of the 17th, middle 18th century, we, the scientists, dealt with problems of simplicity. What are problems of simplicity? We have very few variables. For example, the planet Earth and the sun, an apple and gravity, a billiard ball and another billiard ball, and we have a force and we can fully predict what is going to happen. Then at the end of the 18th century and 19th, science opened these new possibilities of dealing with billions of variables, but they are not interacting. These are sort of averages. Think the molecule of gas or people in a population. So here we deal with statistics. It is also something that we know how to do extremely well. It gives a relatively good approximation in terms of predictions. It's what, for example, insurances use. It's what predictions within policies has used for many years. But we also know that if we move from a place where the parts do not interact to a situation in which the parts interact, think economy, in which the actors are influencing each other, this method crashes, and we have seen it very well. And so what Weaver was saying, what we didn't do and what we need to do, and indeed is what we are doing for the last 50 years, is problems of organized complexity. So here we have many variables, but the variables interact. So if it's a group of social people, they interact and they influence each other. So statistics will not give me a prediction because it's an average, but I will have trends, I will have patterns. So while I can recognize the patterns, here we enter in the non-predictable. Now, why does it matter in the context of sense making? I will give just a few examples. A clear example of a complex system is the birds flocking in the sky. So we said many elements. Here the elements are the birds. They interact strongly, very strongly. They are flocking, they see each other, they have not to bump into each other. They create patterns which are extremely big in relation to their scale. So they don't see the patterns, but they create it. These patterns emerge without a central control. There is no command center in the flock. It is emergent. So it self-organizes. We find it also in social insects, for example, the way that ants organize, the way the bees organize. Why I'm saying it? Because we discovered in the last few decades that actually the kind of solution that this operation allows are extremely advanced, surprisingly advanced. The photo in the middle, it's, for example, a termite nest. Now imagine this is a few billion times bigger than the size of the single termite, and it is built over a number of generations, and it's not genetically encoded. There are all kinds of behavior that are somehow memorized in the colony. A different example of the complexity we find in bacterial colony. Again, many, many elements, they communicate with each other, they influence. So we find again the same aspect. But here we find another aspect that it's interesting. Colonies of bacteria can memorize strategies which are learned, which single bacteria cannot, but colony of bacteria can memorize. And so we find this idea of memory without a central control. And of course, the most advanced complex biological system we have, or at least one of the most advanced, is the brain. What do you think this is? What does it remind you? Anybody?
Spider web.
It looks like a web, indeed. It is not a spider web. What else could it be?
Veins, veins.
Almost, almost, but bigger. Think bigger.
Veins bigger.
It's
the railway in Tokyo, the underground in Tokyo.
It's a city.
Wow.
This is the
Dimitri said that. Dimitri said that on
Yeah,
the.
Dimitri
I
said
couldn't
that. Yes.
hear.
Who is Dimitris? I would like to see Dimitris.
Hello, I don't have a camera.
Ah, hello, Dimitri.
We will buy him one because of your correct answer.
Okay, so this is the map of Paris. And as you very well noticed, it looks like a web. It looks very organic. It looks like veins. It doesn't look like something that is fully planned, which is how we regularly think about cities, because cities are not fully planned. They grow across centuries, across millennia. So there is a top-down, but there is a lot of bottom-up. And so one of the really big, interesting, complex systems of this era are cities, and the way that they are influencing everything that we do. And another thing that we see with city, we see how patterns emerge over continuous flows of resources. Most cities grew upon rivers, ports, streets of commerce. And in this satellite image, we see that actually what we are seeing, it's the flow of electricity, yes, which is a flow of a resource. And also when we look at it from above, it looks almost organic. It doesn't look like the cubes that we are used to plan. Another interesting thing that the city introduced, it's okay, but if we are planning things and we are building infrastructure, how come that we find complexity there? Because we are planning, and so it's supposed to be predictable, not unpredictable. But actually, as of today, our global scales are so big that most of the systems which are planned begin to be complex. One of the well-known examples is traffic. There is no direct relation between sizes of street, number of junctions. We tried them all. Traffic is traffic, and it has waves and patterns. There's no way to eliminate it. The next one will be the autonomous driving cars. So maybe eliminating the driver will eliminate traffic. What we see here on the left is the first map that was traced of the internet. The internet, it's an infrastructure. We built it, and yet it is extremely complex. We don't even know all the physical location of the servers. And on top of it, which means the web with the social network, what emerged is extremely complex. And we see it, for example, in all the kind of collective self-organizing aspect of intelligence, of collaboration that were not predicted or considered possible. And to say the last one of these examples, the biosphere in which we live and the climate, clearly, is a very complex system. We have billions and billions of tiny, tiny particles of air and water, and they are moving around with the energy of the sun. And they create patterns, as we can see in these slides. There is this swirling here, we are seeing winds. But of course, the more intense are the flows, and the more is the number of configuration that the patterns can take. It can swirl to the right, to the left, a bit here, a bit there. So even if we have huge simulations, we cannot fully predict weather. We can arrive until about 10 days, but this is the maximum. And this is not a lack of knowledge. This is because the system, by definition, is unpredictable. So from here, unpredictability becomes an inherent aspect of our world, which is not how science described it until the time of Weaver. So to
Sayfan,
conclude, yes.
The questions at the end, or we can ask you questions during your lecture?
Yes, you can. You can.
I have a question here. Very nice exams and very inspired, inspirational ones. I'm sorry about my mistake. However, how the artificial intelligence lower the complexity of the systems and increases the predictability of the systems right now?
Artificial intelligence, in some aspect, it's increasing the complexity.
Increases the complexity.
In some aspect, yes. In some aspect, yes. But we use it in a lot of systems to go over data and find patterns. The only way to actually read the complex systems is to learn the patterns, because like in the flock of birds, we do not know which type exactly of pattern they do, but we know more or less the family. So once we understand the family of patterns of a complex system, we have a domain in which the system behaves, which gives us a bit of predictability. But learning these patterns, it's extremely difficult. And so AI is used to crunch an amazing amount of data to find the patterns. So this is where I would go now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, to conclude this a few words on complexity, I would like to make evident the point that basically all the environments that we live in, the biological, our body, the social network, the cultural, the technological, the big webs, are all complex. And this has implications for how we think, sense make, research, and communicate. So if we accept this complexity, we can never exactly predict. What we do, we model. And it's a slight difference, but it's an important one, because the model, it's always an approximation. We never know everything. There is not this universal knowledge about the system. The system can never be fully known from one location, but we do have excellent heuristic, which means strategies and shortcuts to act in particular situation. Heuristics that today we use, but we apply also to our AI and our robots. They operate as well on heuristic. The third one, which is really important for sense making, is that no matter what we do, we use mental models. We use mental models for the way we think, for the way we perceive, for the way we communicate, which is great because we need it. But we must be aware of that. And what does it mean that we use models? For example, if I am in the savannah and I see with the corner of my eye some stripes which are black and orange, yes, I do not have to work out the whole tiger before I begin to run. But when I am in a different kind of situation and I respond to something small as if it's the full reality, we can have a lot of problems in sense making. We continuously approximate, so knowledge is a process, and we make sense together. Again, if I go back to the cognitive loop, we are actually actively participating into making sense. We don't receive it from the outside. And here I will say a few words about the cognitive aspect. So I'm taking an example from Anil's set. This, of course, it's about perception proper. So it's not a model, but it's perception, models within perception, but they help us understand something very clearly. Someone can tell me, please, which color is A and B on the checkerboard?
A is black.
Please.
Yeah. The white is B.
B is
No?
white and A is dark, right?
I will
It's
say
very
the same.
clear.
Yes.
It's absolutely clear. And now, Galit.
Both are gray. They became
Wow.
gray all of a sudden.
All of a sudden, indeed, it's very disturbing. And now I take it back. They go back to be gray and white. How come? Because we have a model of reality, which is ultimately functional. It considers that there is a cylinder that makes a shadow. And so it adjusts for the shadow. And so the way that we see it, no matter how many times I will go back and forth, it will always be that one is dark and one is clear. Now, what we are seeing here, or at least what I am taking from Anil's set, is this theory of the brain as a prediction machine, which kind of revert the way that we are used to think of it. So the green is our perception. It's actually what impacts our expectation, impacts our perception more than the other way around. So in a way, our mind is generating reality on the basis of prediction from past experience. But then it also validates, yes, and adjusts. But still, perception happened to this prediction and an error. So we first predict and then we do error correction, which means that what we expect shape our conscious experience. The models that we carry do shape the world that we meet. And if we do not expect to see something, which is the case when we go to do research and we are researching something new, we won't necessarily see it. So I will give now a different example from a very famous study. It was done in 2013. It's called The Invisible Gorilla. I know this is a chimpanzee, but it's a beautiful image, but they put a gorilla. So they took a big group of radiologists. As you know, radiologists have this amazing sight, and they are the one to read all the exams from X-ray and MRI, and they can see patterns that we are not able to see. So all of these radiologists were given results of exams to read, and the ones that did the study hide the gorilla on the X-ray. A fantastic 85% of the radiologists did not see the gorilla. And the others that did see the gorilla, after speaking with their colleagues, said that they made a mistake. But
Sayfan, there is another experiment on attention, also involving gorillas.
yes,
Where people are passing,
basketball.
two groups of people are playing with a ball,
Yes,
and they pass it, and somebody dressed up as a gorilla going there, and nobody sees that gorilla going there because people are busy with calculating who is
yes, because
transferring
the
the ball
question
to.
is how many times did they bounce the ball? So, but this is to say that, again, expectations, if you are a fantastic professional, you expect to see what you expect to see. And because of economy of cognition, we cut out all the rest. And so this, I am introducing it because it gives us a very good reason to have methodologies of sense making. So we have to keep in mind that, yes,
I think when you come from the science of management, they say that if someone comes from the outside, they notice things that people that are in the same surroundings don't notice it. So that's why if an advisor comes from outside, they can see things and be more more alert to things that the people who live in that environment are not aware of.
Very much so, indeed. And so we have to be aware to the fact that the magnificent enterprise of knowledge production where we are today, which is outstanding, from the atoms to the universe, all the engineering technology, it's outstanding. And yet our success made us extremely reliant on our models of order, which are mostly machines, categorization. And today we are moving into a world which is more into networks and soft and complex, and not so much about categorization. And so also the metaphors that we use specifically for teaching and researching are fundamental, because the metaphor of the machine that we have used very successfully to describe everything from the city to the brain to the mind does not necessarily carry on very well at the moment. So to summarize, yes, indeed, it is a cognitive process. It's about perception, interpretation, and integration. It is about creating coherency. And here we find another really important line, that narrative, as we will see, it's what helps us navigate naturally complex situations. okay? But we come to these narratives with our past experiences, with our mental models. And this is something that we need to be aware. So two of the most famous researchers on sense making had this, I kind of summarized them into the statement of explore the wider system. So we will look at ways to try and always challenge one's point of view, because it's always very comfortable. But as this little vignette tells us, what you see, it's not necessarily the whole truth. One is shouting boat, the other one is shouting land, because one is on the island and the other one is on the boat. So the second one, it's this necessity of seeking different perspective, whether within the literature or the discourse, whether by introducing others as much as possible. And this introducing other brings us to the next aspect of sense making, which is the social aspect. So we all grew up in a world where the academic or the one that was performing the breakthrough was someone closed in his studio, and he was the one and the genius. And but today we live in a very different reality, and I think we always lived in a very different reality. Just this was the narrative. And so sense making is very much a social situation. It can happen with co-workers, it can happen in teams, in organization, in the social group. And so there are aspects that we need to keep in mind. One, that if you are performing a process of sense making, for example, in a class or within a multidisciplinary group, what you want to have, it's a shared meaning. You need to create a number of anchors of shared meaning where it is clear when we say a word, what does it mean? So it's a matter of language. And the second one, it's this idea of explicit framing. So to create circumstances for collaboration, we need to agree explicitly. It needs to be placed out, which is more difficult than it looks. From which point of view? Framing speak of the point of view. So from which point of view we are looking at things. And it's more difficult than it looks because our point of view is usually completely transparent to us, because this is where we look at things from. So to make it explicit, you need ways to make it explicit. And to continue the social aspect, of course, we are influenced by other people, by the culture we belong to, by the place we are in. And so when we communicate, communication becomes critical in order to create clarity, but not only communication, it's also the channels of communication. And we will see a bit later that it makes a difference if, for example, there is a conversation happening in a dialogue in a group, because maybe there is always the same persons that take over, or they are mediated in some fashion by tangible items, by digital items. Maybe it is a structured kind of event or a digital platform, and it will affect how the sense is made. Why the social aspect is important and also very good, we can again take from complexity, because now we introduce it. What we look at here is a network. The points can be people, and as you see, they are clustered. There are different kinds of clusters, and there is something that is spreading. The red is something that is spreading. It can be news, it can be epidemic, it can be money, I don't know, it can be many things. And let's say that I am one node where the orange circle is. when I'm within the system, I have no way to see the whole picture. So I will not really see the wave coming. But if I distribute cognition, which is something that we do naturally, because we have connections with other people, we have the network, we have impact, for example, we are communicating across institutions. What I'm doing is I actually have direct connections towards much farther points. And so I understand the wave is coming much before than if I stay within my point of view. So the social aspect is indeed about distributing cognition over platforms, social contacts, and the advantages of it. To say a last thing, that influence, its context. Again, if we go to the initial perspective of exact sciences, like the simple problem and the statistical problem, the strength of it, it's universality. What does it mean, universality? It means that when I find out how the force of gravity works, it works the same wherever I go. It doesn't matter if it's Earth, planet Mars, the sun, and so on. So I have a tool that comes with me universally. But when we are dealing with social, technological, nothing is universal, because context impact the way we see things and we understand things. I just brought one simple example. Let's say that we are studying a computer, and this is the way we look at it. If we look at a computer in this format, we will say it's an object. But what will we say if we look at it at in the format on the right, which means we are connected to a set of servers that are connected to the whole internet, which is a global network? What becomes interesting here, it's much beyond the object. I will probably describe it as a window into a global process of communication. So on one case, I will focus on the specifics of the objects. And on the second case, I will focus on how it facilitates my entry into the global network. It's a completely different line of interaction. And it's a matter of context, but it's also, here there is another aspect, it's also a matter of scale. When we speak of complexity, because they are systems that emerge from multiplicities, there is always more than one scale. And when I look at one scale or a different scale, they don't necessarily have the same logic. And so when I do research into complexity, I always need to look at few scales, at least at the scale of the individual and the global, but there is usually the interesting one are also in the middle. Small groups, clusters, hubs, communities, this becomes where the interesting pattern happen. So technologies, I will say methodologies, because I don't really enter in the technologies, though there are many. If I take everything that I opened till here, I would say that one of the main demands is to go beyond, or necessities, is to go beyond one expectation. And in this, one of the things that become really interesting, it's this aspect of representation. It's really important that whatever we do, we find a way to represent it in multiple ways. So we can map, we can write, we can sketch, we plot, we analyze, we discuss it with others. And in my experience, to push students to do that, it's yielding different depths of results, because they really manage to meet the topic from a different, it's like it's not a wall anymore, it's a landscape. And in the landscape, you can move, which brings us to maps. which is the first one very recommended tool used in sense making. I call it here moving our ability to perceive. Let's see if it works. So let's think a moment of maps. Maps probably have been one of the greatest human invention in terms of collective production of knowledge. Think of, okay, doesn't give it to me. Think of the beginning of the modern world. There was no, of course, there was no satellite. There was just ships and peregrines and commerce, people walking on the land. And there's that much that you can walk. But they managed to create this huge map of the world, basically by integrating the knowledge of different individuals on a map. So we start with a mental model. Let's say I have the memory of my journey. I transform it into a tangible media. It can be the visual model on the map, or it can be a book like Marco Polo. And this representation actually feed back in the mental model I have. And most of the time, I will upgrade it. I will approximate. Like when I have an idea and I write it, and then when I read it, I change it. Or I have some kind of research direction and I map it, and then I adjust it. So we have to keep in mind that we do understand information by visual, by representing it. We share information by representing it, because if you're trying to explain an idea to someone, most of the time you will sketch it on something, whatever you have. And we also, here the map of the world, it arrived a bit late, and we also expand understanding by sharing its representation, which means that we can combine our understanding upon a visual representation. There is no right map. This is taken from Miro. Miro is something that I use a lot with the students, and for my work, it's basically a white canvas. I'm sure you can use Canvas. I'm just, this is what I use. And it's nice because you can just throw things in, even if you don't have an order, and then begin to make connections. And then eventually the map becomes a taskscape, which means, what can I do? What can I do in terms of relevant acts? So this particular map was from 2 students in a master. They were researching how come that in Brussels there is a critical shortage of teachers in elementary school. They started from nothing. They started from making research on the journals, but then slowly, it started to grow and to aggregate, and they started to interview from the map, understanding what they need to ask, and they kept on putting things until they arrived to the point of making a full set of articles and whatever. It became a very big project, but it started from the place of, I see the problem, I don't know what to do. You begin to map, you start to aggregate knowledge, you collaborate upon it, and it gives you doors for action. And then on this, yes, someone said something. Hillel. Okay. We have also, you can do all kinds of map. There are from the simplest map to the more handwritten map, complex ones, like this was a huge project of a group of 6 students having to redesign the patient flow in an emergency room. So they worked on it for a full semester. And as you see, it's very complex. And this was from the course of sense making of 2 semesters ago, we had an international student, and she was from Milan, from the Technion there, and she wanted to research how bioplastic is produced and consumed in Europe. And again, she started from very small, and she managed to come out in the end with a really, really interesting presentation. Now, maps, okay, of course, today they are digital, but they can be also tangible. Now, I don't know if this is relevant for everybody, but in the beginning, I said that there is this aspect of power dynamics in communication. So if, for example, we have a discussion in the class and it's always the same students that come out because they're strong, yes, there is a different way to do it, which means that the questions are asked, but instead of being discussed, the answers are being written on pieces of paper, and the pieces of paper are arranged, for example, on a surface. This is only one way, yes? And then everybody goes on the wall or the table, and they have to read. So all of the voices are kind of exposed, and usually it provides a much richer discussion after. So not to jump directly to back and forth with the same 2-3 people that jump up, but to do this kind of passage when it's relevant, when there is the possibility, allows actually a second stage of discussion, which is much more interesting. Yeah, this is what I was saying now, balancing social dynamics. Another methodology which is used a lot in sense making, of course, is narratives. So how we cohere the framework. Narratives, okay, it's like we evolved to tell stories, so we empathize with story, first of all. We respond to it, they matter to us. So I'm not entering here too much about the ethnographic research, which I think it's not relevant for everybody. But if someone ever needs to interview people for their research, it's always, you will always get more data and more knowledge by asking specific stories than to ask what they think about. So if they think something, can you give me a particular example? And this is something that becomes truly important also in the communication of projects. So students should learn how to make stories as part of what they use to present the difference of their innovation. In design, you have user journeys, you have hero journeys, but it's not only for design. I think it works in any kind of communication, education, engineering, wherever there is a pitch in front of someone that it's not part of the same culture. This is, for example, we put students 2 by 2, and they had to find, they were given problems, and they had to find a short story that would illustrate it. I see that we're almost at 5. Kostas, how long we have?
To be honest, I have to be at the airport at 6, but you can go on. This is very interesting. Go on, and I will tell you.
Okay, I have only this, and then we're done. Okay, so this is one of the very known methodologies of sense making, but it's more for action into a particular situation. It's for organizations, it's for future planning, but I think it helps a lot also for research for the students. So this is how I'm going to look at it. The cynefin is a framework that was created by Snowden. You can see here there are 4 quadrants. The ones on the right belong to the predictable aspects, and the one to the left are unpredictables. So we have simple, complicated, complex, and chaotic. And it's very interesting when students begin to research, or even I begin to research something that it's wide, it's useful to ask, to try and understand which aspect of the problems are simple, which are complicated, which mean simple means we know and we have best practice. So when we say simple, we are speaking of known knowns. You just need the knowledge. You can find it. It's very easy to find, and there is no surprises here. The complicated is a bit more complicated, which means it's still in the known, but you need an expert. So, for example, you need a special kind of nanotechnology, or you need a special type of concrete. The different experts will give you different responses. So it's known unknowns for which we have a number of possible solutions. So it's still in the predictable, but it's a different kind of knowledge. You need to be an expert, and according to the expert way you take, you're going to land somewhere else. The complex, it's, as we said, it's unpredictable, but we have patterns. So what you want to do with the complex, you want to probe the situation to see how it responds, so that you can extract the patterns. Or, as Konstas was saying before, you crunch data, and if you crunch data, you get the patterns, and then you have a way to interact with this aspect. And chaotic, okay, there is nothing. There is no cause and effect relationship. There is nothing that can be said about it other than it's the, the black swan card. Now, it looks simple, but it's actually a very powerful way to analyze things, because someone can do it personally on their item of research, but this can be also a way to agree and disagree upon things if we are trying to innovate, or if we are trying to solve a big problem and we have to decide which aspects of the problem belong where. And what Snowden developed are different modalities to respond in each situation. So if you are in the simple, you categorize. We're very good at categorizing. There is no reason to do anything else. If you are in the complicated, you must analyze. So you may have different scenario, you need some kind of expertise, so it's analysis. When you go to the complex, you need to interact. You cannot analyze only, you need to interact, you need to prototype, you need to have some kind of dialogue with the system, you need patterns. And if you are in the chaotic, which for us is less relevant, you basically need to get out of there. This is what you want. Now, the interesting thing is that you can also use this framework to understand dynamics. So, for example, if you are in the territory of the simple, yes, and the system becomes too rigid, you may have a break on this membrane, and the system may fall from simple to chaotic. Or if you have something that it's simple, but it continues to aggregate, for example, it is scaling, it may cross over this membrane and become complicated. Complex can produce some kind of very clear pattern, and once you have the pattern, you're actually going back to complex to complicated. So that's why you want to find out patterns. If you have patterns, you move to the territory of the complicated, which means predictable. But if the complex it's let out of check, or it is slowly reaching tipping points, it can fall down to the chaotic, and then you're not going to recover it again. So I think it's what I do usually in many of the classes in different kind of subjects, I very much demand from the students as a first thing to map visually. I need to see it, their colleagues need to see it, discussions are happening on the map. The second thing is to be aware that whatever they do has some kind of narrative. So to take it out, to make it explicit, and then to decide if this is the narrative, but to declare it. And if it is a very wide problem, for example, bioplastic, the way it is produced and used in Europe, to understand which parts are simple and complicated, and then it's clear which kind of actions can be done there, and which parts belong to the socio-technological, to the environmental, so they're complex, and they potentially become chaotic. Okay, I think that we said a lot. This is the sense-making. I think for now we can take questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sayfan. Very interesting, very interesting presentation. I have some questions, and I will give the floor now to the audience if you have a question. Otherwise, I can start with mine.
I'd like to make a small comment or question. We keep saying on things that this is complex, right? Or this is a complex problem. We shouldn't say that, right? It's like
it
wrong
depends.
according to the mapping that you just presented. Like it was mind-blowing for me. I must say, I have to read so much after your presentation. It changed the way I see things. Thanks a lot. But this complex thing, I will never ever use this word complex again so frequently.
Go.
No, I let you speak and then I will speak.
Okay. Some things are complex. Like if you have social networks, like if there are connections among people, there is a complex aspect. You cannot cut it out. There is no way. So, but it's important to use it with, like to understand why we are using it. We're using it to say that something cannot be exactly predicted, or that it has emergent properties, which is usually very interesting, that it can self-organize, like social movements, that it can surprise us. But we don't say to say, Chaim, life is complex. Though life is complex, but yeah.
But I think that one of the criteria, I don't know, this was one of my questions, in order to characterize something like complex, should be the number of the parameters above which something can be determined. For example, nanotechnology, anything smaller than 5 nanometers is considered a nanotechnology system. In the case of the complexity, I don't think so that is like to say complex. I don't think so that's a bad word.
You look for a threshold. You look for a threshold.
Exactly. You need, the minimum number of the parameters above which the threshold, something can be considered complex, which means that you need more depth, you need probably more brain power, you need more collaboration, you need more partners, you need more disciplines to address a problem. This is is there any threshold? This is my question.
So complexity, like the study of complex system, it's horizontal. It crosses all disciplines. So you go from the exact mathematics all the way to social studies.
I agree.
So
About the number of the parameters that define
yes,
a complex problem. Do we have a number? That
this is the problem, that you do not have one definition. If you describe it from the standpoint of computation, you have a specific definition. If you describe it from the standpoint of social dynamics, it's a different. It's like, it doesn't help you to know that beyond 15 interacting variables, it is complex. You need to know that if you have a social system that is beyond 3 people, you will begin to have dynamics. But it's not it's not a threshold. So complexity has this problem for 20 years now. It's like they don't all use the same definition. But this is why the way I present it is through this idea of many elements interacting, producing patterns at the system level. When you see this, you know there is complexity. If you see that there is a pattern which is produced at the system level, not at the individual level, and you have many elements, you know there is complexity.
So, Sayfan, I have a question on this, because I have made the question if complexity is an active or a passive element. For me, it's an active element. So something that has started to be complex, let's say, in its particular, field, it can be more complex, because the situation will change. Is this true? Or probably the individuals that they interact, the level of the knowledge of the people will change.
I think that if we take it from the perspective of sense making, if you do a process of sense making, you can reach a convergence. And so you go down from something that is complex and cannot converge to something that it's actually easy to agree and share. That's why the narratives, the mapping, the sharing, the framing, these are all ways to enter complexity, but to manage to converge within it upon some sense.
But the complexity of a system is an active thing. You cannot say you study it and you say it's a passive element. It's an active element. It can change every day, no?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by active.
Probably you don't understand because, I'm not familiar with the topic and probably my question is not well expressed. For example, you have the complexity, let's say the traffic within a city.
Yes.
This could be an active, element because can change, in summer, the complexity is more. And in the winter, probably the complexity is less. So I would like to, my question is like the time as a parameter, does it affect all, these problems independent of the discipline that they have this complex character?
Specifically traffic, it's like, even if you don't have a high density, because you still have people that naturally go a bit slower and then a bit faster and then a bit slower, when you combine all of the effects, you still have traffic. So on the big highways, you have traffic, even if the density of cars, the intensity of flow does not justify it. It's simply because they mount on each other.
There is a question from the chat. I believe that the deeper one analyzes a situation, the more complex it tends to become. However, when faced with overwhelming complexity, it becomes crucial to break the problem down into manageable components. By simplifying the problem and understanding its fundamental elements, one can establish a solid foundation from for comprehension. Once a clear understanding is achieved through dissecting and comprehending simple steps, it becomes feasible to scale the problem back up to its original complexity. Do you agree? So this is reverse engineering somehow.
Okay, this is the very good and very successful reductionist approach, which means you take a big problem, you break it down into simple problems, and then you go back to the system. The whole point of complexity is that you cannot do it. Because if you cut the parts, you lose the patterns at the level of the system. So yes, you will understand the parts much better, but putting the well-understood parts back together will not explain the behavior of the overall system. So we need a different approach. So sense making, it's not about cutting it to chunks and understanding each chunk in its simple version, but it's trying to cohere the process, while the process can never abandon completely the system. It needs to operate within it. I don't know how to say it, but it's, if we go back to the reductionist approach, we are leaving complexity aside, which we're very good at it. But it's not what you need, because if you have a social kind of event, you need to treat or to deal also with the social kind of event, which cannot be reduced.
So the complexity, it looks to me like quantum mechanics, to be honest, because when you, in quantum mechanics, when you make the measurement, you destroy the quantum character, so you don't have quantum mechanics. So my question,
In this sense, yes.
In this complexity study or this in sense making, there is a possibility something to happen then, you know, if you would like to predict, no? There is a strong possibility this to happen. Am I right?
You can have scenarios, you can have domains of possibility, you can have emergency plans because maybe something happens that you don't expect. But it's like, it's the overall approach. It's not about having the exact prediction.
Correct.
It's the interaction with the systems. But
like quantum mechanics.
Kostas, we do it all the time. Like when we plan a new neighborhood for a city, we don't have the predictability of how it will work. But we have some characters and we can involve the people. And we can invite the population and we can learn from previous experience and so on. But we are actually doing it. It's like you go with the heuristics, you know, you don't know a priori, you cannot predict exactly what will happen. When we design a new object or a new machine, you cannot know what will be the impact in the same fashion in which we don't know what will happen now that AI is free range on the social networks. We will know it eventually in a few years. We will know the ripples because the ripples are complex.
Correct. And I have my last question because the way that you presented this, you would like Gali to speak? Yes, please.
Yeah. Just further to your previous question, if I'm allowed to continue it in a sense.
Please do.
So it's somehow that there's no point in thinking in terms of intuition, or if I'm an expert, there's no place for this kind of intuition that we have.
There is.
Okay.
First of all, intuition, the way that we look at it is as it's intuition which is based, okay? The famous 10,000 hours, what they do, they deliver intuition. You can't call intuition something that it's not based on deep kind of experience. And there are many things that we do with intuition, but why? Because we are complex cognitive system. We are really good at cognizing complexity. We just not aware, not used to, but we are really, really good at it. So the first aspect, which I couldn't do here, but the first aspect of sense making in complexity, it's cognitive complexity, which means the way that you approach a problem and maintain it. You don't bring it down to the simple problem solving linear approach. So and I think we are all there, you know, we look at us. It's like we are coming from all over the map. We are discussing, and we are acquiring this kind of diversity. Okay, I think, I don't know, maybe we need to close. We are 15 minutes.
I will close. Sayfan, I have a last question regarding as a pedagogical tool, because it looks to me like an excellent pedagogical tool and reminds me a little bit the design thinking approach when you try to analyze a problem. What are the main questions that we should make to our students in order to start to work to create the complexity of a problem? So you mentioned bioplastics. So what kind of questions did you set to your students in order to start to develop this mapping? Or you let them, you know, by yourself?
For example.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, this is another lecture, but to begin with, for example, a very good question is, let's say that to understand the complexity of something is to take the basic action of it. It doesn't matter. It can be the use of a particular type of plastic. And the first thing is to map all the elements that are connected to it, all what is needed in order for it to happen, and all what is influenced by it existing, and to push them to do it much beyond the first border, which means we are usually looking at it on a first contour. Like, so if I am speaking of drinking a cup of coffee, I need the coffee, I need the glass, I need the water, and I need the spoon. But after that, it's, okay, where is the water coming? How is it made hot? What is the infrastructure beyond the electricity? And suddenly the complexity explodes, because I just wanted a cup of coffee, but actually I need a full network of electricity, water infrastructure, purification, the climate. I need everything in order to drink this cup of coffee. And then the complexity comes up. And then within this, they need to make a line, a contour, what they really, really want to go into, because you can never deal with the whole system. A system continues forever. You need to make the contour, but then you are clear that you are within something which is very big and very complex, but you are tracing an arbitrary contour of your problem.
Excellent. I think that this is the best way to teach, because also you generate the creative thinking, the decision making of your students. Am I right here? This is our purpose. It's not, you know, just to teach them formulas. However, you know, the formulas, you can start from the formulas to create what is happening. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Excellent. I will share, you know, this recording through our YouTube channel, but you will find the link only through our Facebook. So you should join our Facebook in order to find the link and, you know, watch it again, or join us in the YouTube channel. This is not a blackmail, this is a tip. So I would like to thank you very much, because it was really nice. Thank you very much, Nava, also for introducing us, Sayfan, and I hope that we will meet soon.
Sayfan is part of the impact, and you see several other members of the school here, and we are totally devoted to the project.
And I would like to say hi to Yoel, because I remember Yoel, I think from Brussels. You have
Yael, you have Galit, you have
Hillel.
The whole gang is here.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Have a safe
Costa.
night, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a safe trip.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Sayfan, you were amazing.
Have a safe
You
weekend.
were amazing. I have to talk to you much more. Now I see you.
Good.
I won't
stop
asking you stupid questions. I'm sorry, but it was too interesting.
Bye, חברים. תמשיכו
Bye,
offline.
bye, bye.
There are no stupid questions. It's a part of the complexity, the questions.
True, true. There is no stupid question.
Only complex.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.